Chris Wood here from Rising Phoenix Mental Health Channel. And I have provided a couple of bits of information with regards to the interview I did with Sue Fiera from Hopeful Tribe. And what I'd like to do now is actually post it. So this is going to be the full 1 hour interview that I did with her. And I'm going to actually have another interview, part 2, because I guess Sue had questions that unfortunately we weren't able to get answered because we went over time. So I hope you enjoy it and stay tuned for part 2. Take care.
All right, I want to welcome Chris Wood from the Rising Phoenix Mental Health Channel. I love your poster, by the way.
Thank you.
That is gorgeous. I now need to go get a Hopeful Tribe one.
You should. I actually got some. I got some baseball caps made up, and I'm going to get some mugs. And it's kind of fun to just play around with your brand, eh?
Yeah, I love it. That's the colors, beautiful.
Well, the
did
colors.
You make that?
I did not make that. I paid somebody to. I mean, this is about all my creativity is literally just getting on and talking. That's about as far as my creativity goes. I don't. I wish
you're not a visual artist.
Well, yeah, that's it. So I mean, but it's those colors were picked for a reason. It's the teal color is for PTSD. Yeah. And of course, the Rising Phoenix is the Rising Phoenix, you know. Yeah, so it's I enjoy it. I like it. I like it a lot. So thank you.
Beautiful. It is beautiful.
Thanks.
I love it. And I first encountered one of your videos on the VRA group on Facebook, because we both belong to the VRA fam. Yeah. Shout out to Think Media and Sean Cannell and all those guys. Hey! I love them. I watched Sean Cannell's videos for about a year before I joined. I just watched lots of them for free and didn't really think that I would ever join a group that I had to pay for, because I tend to be extra thrifty. But then when I was launching Hopeful Tribe, which was at the end of March of this year, I realized that whenever I'm starting something new, it's always been really helpful for me to have a support group.
Yeah.
So like we were talking about earlier, when I was new in substance use recovery, I joined AA and found it really, really helpful, you know? And then I joined VRA when I was new in the YouTube journey, and I was like, yeah, this was the right decision. This was really a good deal.
Totally, because it's and I get where you're coming from there. Like, you know, there's so much stuff that's being thrown at you on YouTube as far as, you know, like just starting up your YouTube channel and whatnot. But what I really like about these guys is they're real, you know, like Sean is like the real deal. Like I love when people just basically just tell it like it is.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? Not like, you know, we're going to just go around the bush, up the fence, and around the corner to, you know, to get your point across. Just tell me, please. I just, you know, time is of the essence here.
Yeah, he's super authentic. And I think that his team is what keeps him super organized, right? I don't think he's organized by nature. I think that they've really helped him to get organized. And so the whole team puts together something that's really useful. And for me, the most useful part of joining the VRA fam was that Facebook group where I found you, because I feel like, you know, Sean and these guys, the whole Think team are amazing. However, our access to them is really limited. But I can go on the VRA Facebook page at 3 a.m. and somebody's gonna answer me,
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't even know how many, questions I got answered to, especially when you're just starting off and it's such a huge learning curve. Like, going from being a police officer for 20 years to now being a YouTube creator, like
little different.
a little bit different. So I've gotten a lot of help. It's such a great idea to start a tribe for each little genre and getting some good and lots of really good feedback. Where I've literally used it. I went, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. And I think out of all because I have a few groups on Facebook, and this group's been probably one of the most helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And supportive, which is great,
Yeah. So I'm really grateful that I found it, and one of the new benefits is that I met you through it. So there you go.
There you go.
I found that one of the things that's really helped my YouTube channel launch is getting to know the whole mental health space on YouTube. Like, just going on YouTube and exploring, and then finding people I resonate with and inviting them on my channel for an interview. It's been really amazing. My most viewed videos are all interviews. And I didn't think when I started that anyone would watch an hour-long video. So I was just doing little 5-10 minute clips, But when I started the interview series, I found out, no, people will actually watch an hour of this content if it's interesting. So I just keep doing it. I keep finding people that I think are interesting in our space and inviting them on.
That sounds cool to me.
Yeah, it's totally fun. And I've met some of the coolest people, including yourself. One of my other collaborators is in Canada, and she's amazing. Have you met Shirley Shea?
No, I haven't.
Oh, you'll like her. Like her. She's awesome. But one of the things that drew me to you is that I think probably the majority of your videos talk about your recovery from PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a topic that's really near and dear to my heart. No, not only as a helper, but also as someone who's also in recovery from PTSD. So I said, you need to invite this woman on here so she can share her gems.
Yeah. It's been very therapeutic.
Oh, actually doing the YouTube channel's been therapeutic for you. Yeah. That's so great.
Totally. And it's a great way to sort of just chat and talk about how you're feeling without literally having a group of people sitting there with you talking about how you're feeling. It's kind of like it seems to be like my safe zone, but mm-hmm. I'm able to share in a way that it's still in my boundaries, we'll say, if that makes sense, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And you can do it from your bedroom if you want.
I can do it from my bedroom, my gym, wherever I am. In the forest.
Oh my gosh, I forgot where you are. You have forest. That's so cool.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's really cool.
One of my safe places is the forest. So yeah, I tend to do a lot of hikes out there with the dogs and stuff. So yeah.
Well, you have an amazing story. You want to share a little bit so that for people who haven't seen your channel before?
Yeah, for sure. So I was a police officer for 20 years. And in that time frame, I worked 10 years of my career in the Arctic.
Wow.
Yeah. So I worked with the Inuit. And I let's see now, I moved around quite a bit. So I did 2 tours, and meaning that it's volunteer to go up there. Like you're not, I work for the RCMP, so the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And they don't say, okay, you're going to go live up in the Arctic for 10 years, because it is a bit of a process, because it's very isolated. All fly-in posts or communities. And so you got to be sort of ready for that, right? So usually, you know, you've got to go through psychological questionnaires and all kinds of stuff to make sure that this is going to be okay for you and your family. But anyway, all my trauma came from the Arctic. And yeah, so just to give you some idea, basically, I did all my work in Nunavut territory. So that we have 3 territories here in Canada, and they're all in the north, like north. And like I was north of 60, the parallel of 60. So that's how north I was.
Wow.
And they have per capita the highest rate in suicide, in domestic violence, in pretty much any kind of violence, murder, all of that stuff. Really serious, like sexual crimes and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, it kind of, doing the 2 tours. I did 1 tour, so I was there for about 7 years, and I moved around 3 times in Nunavut territory, and then I went south again for another year, back to Ontario, and then went back north because I missed it really. And I really like the work because it's really community-oriented work. Like you're kind of living in a bubble, or living in a fishbowl, so to speak. But that didn't bother me really that much because you're part of the community, but you're also the enforcement of the community too. So you got to meet some really good people. I've got friends that I keep in touch with now. That, you know, I might have been in this community, say in Arctic Bay for like, you know, like, I don't know, 8 years ago. And I'm still really good friends with people up there. So that's where my trauma is based out of. And I think the big thing about the type of work that I did based on community work with Indigenous people in isolated communities, to first responsive policing in a city, like say, Toronto, is you don't get to know the people really at all that you're dealing with, whether they're a victim or a witness, or maybe they're the individual that's been arrested. You don't get to know them. Whereas in a small community or settlement, as they call them, you get to know them. They could be the same person, could be a witness, a victim, a suspect, all at once, or you're dealing with them on mental health issues for suicidal ideation. You'd be dealing with the families. You get to know these people really well. And I think that was what I really loved about it, because I really could tell that I was serving, but I was giving back, and I was able to see the difference in people that I actually connected with. So that's pretty damn cool. You don't really get to do that as a police officer unless you're in a position that I was in. Mm-hmm. In saying that, the other side is that when things happen, like serious trauma happens in the community, because you know the individuals, it really hits hard, because you feel it as well. Whereas you don't have that connection when you're working in like first responsive policing, where you're just going from A, B, D. You're basically just going to where you're being called to go to. You deal with that call and you move on to the next one. You don't get to have that connection. Yeah. So yeah, so I developed PTSD up there, and I did actually I did actually get traumatized when I was a kid. I was sexually assaulted when I was 8 years old, and so I already had that going into this career, and it kind of what is the word? It developed into, as opposed to PTSD or PTSD-C or CPTSD, it developed into what they call occupational stress injury. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's basically getting involved in a trauma while you're at work, is what it is. So, but it's repetitive. So it's not something that happens just once. It happens over and over and over again. So that's what I have. And of course, coming along with it came anxiety and depression and all that stuff. Mostly because when I finally went off work, I was experiencing a few symptoms, some significant symptoms when I was still working in the North. But I was not ready to, I just kind of went, you know what, I'm just tired. I just need a break. Because you're working quite a bit up there. You're on call. There's a lot of, right? Because it's not like you can take upon a lot of staff to come in and take over when something happens. That's not how it works. You're basically, you're involved all the time.
How many other officers were there with you?
Well, I worked in settlements where there was either anywhere from 2, so myself and another officer. I worked in the capital of Nunavut, so Iqaluit, which is, there's about 7,000 people that were living there at the time, which doesn't seem like a lot, but in a small community, that's quite a bit. I think it's grown quite a bit since then, where there was upwards to about 25 members. And even still, even though you were in an environment where it was a community, a settlement, you still got to know those people, but it wasn't as connected as the smaller settlements. And then my last tour, which was in Cambridge Bay, which is on the west side, it's just north of Manitoba. And I worked there for about almost 4 years, and I was actually in charge there. So I was the detachment commander, which just puts another huge aspect of things. And I had a team there were 6 of us. 6 of us, but really there was always somebody off on holidays. And up there you'd get a month off at a time. Because you don't get to take any time off when you're there. Right. so you take the month off. And so we were always short because of that, right? So yeah, it just depended where. So I worked in communities that were really small, up to about, maybe 800 people. 99% were Inuits, to, a team of where there's 4 watches, about 5 per watch type of thing. So yeah, I've done a little bit of everything. I've ran 2 detachments when I was up there. One when I was just the 2 of us, which was really interesting. You work in a community where there's just 2 police officers. You best be able to get along,
right? And did you get along?
Well, yes, I was the angel, I got along with everybody. No, I did get along, thank God, with the members I worked with. And one of them I'm really, really good friends with, still to this day. He's one of my closest friends. So yeah, it really does help, because you go through things together that you're just not going to experience anywhere else in Canada. So it really helps if you have that connection. Yeah. So I started developing some things, just to give you an idea, where I've been in this community for, say, 3 years, and I had dealt with a specific, say, a suicide, for example. In this case, it was a suicide. And it was pretty horrific. Not only horrific, the actual scene, but more so the family. Because it's really, to me, it's about the people that are left behind.
Yes.
Having to deal with the trauma. So now you're really sucked into that, right? Anyway, so I was, after that happened a few weeks later, I was like forgetting where I'm going to a call, and I would forget where I had to go, you know, things like that. Where I had this community for 3 years, or I would be going into a house, and I would literally think I'm in the house where that trauma happened, you know, like 4 weeks ago. Really strange stuff, but I would just say, you know what, I'm just tired. I just need a break, right? So I would, and then, you know, but I also did a lot of drinking, and that was my way of coping.
That's a really common way of coping.
Yeah, totally. And it seemed to sort of keep things at bay for a while. But when I finally came out of the north, that's when things started to get really, really yucky, we'll say, where I was developing more symptoms. I was drinking more. I was working a lot. I was always a workaholic, for sure. But that, I think, has to do with just who I am as a person, being so hard on myself and wanting to do the best job that I can. But that was also another way of coping with all the shit that I had to deal with. Yeah. So all that, I actually went through, in the midst of going through a divorce, and I pretty much lost everything. Like I hit rock bottom twice, and had been, I was committed into a hospital for 7 weeks, and worked with some really good people there to just start getting the balls sort of rolling. But I wasn't really accepting the fact that I was an addict. So because of that, even when I got out of the hospital, I started getting back into drinking again, and, you know, just wasn't ready to deal with any of that stuff, right? Yeah, so two treatment facilities, probably about almost a year of treatment. You know, fast forward 2.5 years later, and here I am. You know, I'm getting my identity back. You know, I have a purpose. That was the biggest thing for depression for me, was that was all I was so invested in this organization. I was invested in being a police officer, and that's really all I thought I was. You know, somebody asked me, well, who are you? I'm a police officer, and I'm a lot more than that. Like, that's just a tiny little bit, but that was what I thought back then. That's what.
Yeah. And I think that's really common too. I think for a lot of people, especially in Western cultures, you know, there's this idealization of the career part of their life, and that becomes the primary part of their identity, you know?
Totally. So when I realized that was at risk, that I drank more, I knew that I was able to work, because, you know, when things really hit me, they hit hard. It was like, I started to see, like, flashbacks was just, it was literally like seeing a movie, and it's being fast forwarded. And so that was what was happening. I was seeing like 9 different traumas that were like just like that. I wasn't sleeping. I didn't want to sleep because I was having nightmares. Like, it all happened really, like, there were some warning signs there. And, you know, as I've talked in the past, you know, on previous videos about how your body just will take over. Well, that's exactly what happened. I wasn't dealing with this stuff, so my body went, well, guess what, Chris?
Now you get to deal with it. I know I went through a similar phase in my 20s, with the flashbacks, and it was over like a 10-day period. It was like I felt like I was in a movie theater, strapped to a seat, just forced to relive the worst, most traumatic memories from my childhood. And I was really fortunate I didn't end up having to go inpatient because I had enough supportive people around me that could basically babysit me for 10 days so that I could stay safe while I was going through that. But it was horrible. It was like the worst horror movie ever.
Yeah, it's, I'll tell you what, there's such a huge stigma around mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And in the policing community, PTSD, and even though they're starting to come around, with the organization that I was working for, we were kind of behind the times a little bit. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact is that we're a very large and diverse police force across Canada,
Mm-hmm.
that it's challenging to put together a mental health program that is going to work for wherever it is that you're actually working.
Right.
So, you may be in an area where there's lots of support around you, like lots of resources, or you may be in an area where there's absolutely zero. So it's a bit tricky. But the thing is that it's still looked upon in the police world as being a weak thing. You're a weak link, we'll say, if you have PTSD. That was Neo.
Oh, that was Neo. Neo, you're awake. What are you doing?
He's awake.
You want to say hi to Hopeful Tribe? Come up and say hi.
I'll have to move you down. There we go.
Hi, baby. Oh, you're so handsome. Look at your face. Oh my gosh.
What is going on?
He's got a deep voice.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah, I know. He's a talker too, eh?
Yeah, both your dogs are very verbal.
Very vocal dogs.
I think Neo and Morpheus need to be in more of the videos.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're definitely movie stars too.
Yeah. You're right. I've only had them in a few videos. I need to do some more with my boys.
Yeah, well, you're just getting started too.
But what I was talking about, now that I recall, was just about the stigma around PTSD and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And that's another reason why I wanted to start a YouTube channel, is just to get the word out there. I will put my videos into certain groups on Facebook that are basically law enforcement groups and whatnot.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, and so that, and I've actually had some feedback. I've had people reach out to me and want to talk, and they feel that it's safe to talk to me because it's getting better. It's better than it was, say, 20 years ago. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to take some time. They're slowly. RCMP is slowly getting involved with this mental health. They're getting on board, but it's going to take some time for that to happen. So anyway, yeah, it's I was talking about the stigma thing, but so that's been helpful. It's been very therapeutic, like I mentioned before. And I learned a lot. I've learned a lot about myself. Like, the average person, you'd ask them this question. So, who are you? What are you about? Why do you do the things that you do? Have you ever thought about that before? You get into a situation where you're getting really pissed off. Say you're driving somewhere and there's a traffic jam and you're getting really pissed off that somebody just cut in front of you, you're not moving, and why are you reacting that way? What is it? What was that just happened? That action that made you react that way? I never thought like that before. I used to just, blinders, what's in front of me, running around with my head cut off like a chicken, just, trying to just manage life.
Mm-hmm.
I never stopped and just, as they say, smell the flowers or take a breath. I never did that.
Yeah.
And I bet you if we were to do a poll, I bet you a lot of people aren't doing that. They're not taking the time to just look at life, like be aware of your surroundings, be aware, like look past what's in front of you. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I've been blessed with in this whole journey, is just being able to know who you are and being self-aware. Now, in the same sense, it's actually kind of shitty because you now know why you're feeling the way you're feeling, and now it's having to deal with those feelings and being in those feelings and sitting in those feelings. And it's like, some days I just wish that I didn't know any of that shit, and I just kind of continued on, like,
right,
Matrix, for example, being in the Matrix and not
having to deal with life on this plane. Yeah.
Totally.
I feel like there's a couple things I want to share with you. One is, I totally believe that there's a lot of mental health stigma on police forces. That totally makes sense. However, I worked mostly in nonprofits as a therapist since 1987, and there's that same mental health stigma in nonprofits. In like clinical nonprofits, places where the whole business is providing clinical services. And there was always this stigma and the sense that if you started to be negatively impacted by the work, because I mostly worked out on the streets with people who were unhoused and severely mentally ill and stuff like that, that you were weak. There was something wrong with you if it started to get to you.
Yeah.
So one of my visions for, growing Hopeful Tribe is that eventually it'll create enough income for me to open up a retreat for people who are, suffering from burnout and PTSD or OSI, like you were talking about, who really need some time to reflect, like you were also talking about. Most of us never get the opportunity to reflect. We're just so busy surviving. I think this whole system we have set up is set up for us to not have time to reflect. I mean, honestly, if you're working in any field 40 hours a week, how do you have time to reflect and spend time with loved ones and eat healthy and exercise and all these other things, right, that are optimal for our health? I mean, how do you even have time, right? I don't know. I just think it's really messed up the way we have things set up, and it's a shame that people have to end up in the hospital or almost dying before they have the time to stop and reflect and rethink how they're coping,
Yeah, I attempted suicide twice. And the second time I was this close to succeeding, and that scared the hell out of me. And that's what woke me up was and I literally, I was supposed to be going in for an interview with a substance abuse expert specialist doctor that was hired by the RCMP just to see how I was doing. And I was so incredibly anxious and nervous about that whole thing. it just got into my head, and I was obsessing about it and stuff, and it just made my day worse and worse and worse. And I had to travel to the mainland. So to give you some idea, I had to get a ferry and travel 2 hours to get to the mainland in Vancouver.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, and I did all that on my own, which was probably not the best idea. I should have had some support with me. Looking back at things, maybe it would have been a little bit different, the outcome. But I ended up being detained by a fellow police officer. I had to be searched by a female member. I had to go in the back of a police car. All that happened. They had to take care of my dog Neil. They had to put him in a kennel for me, and they moved my vehicle into a compound on the police detachment side of things. That was the last time, and it really opened things up for me. But getting back to the stigma part of it, I think in general terms, mental health, whether you're an addict or you have some sort of disorder, and I hate the word disorder, but
right,
that's
what they call it.
But there's a huge stigma. Period. There's as you've worked in the field where you've had to talk to and connect with homeless people. There's a lot of mental health around homeless people, and I have to be honest. Before I got sick, I mean, I literally thought in my head that it was something that you can just, suck it up, buttercup, that sort of thing.
Right.
So maybe this is my higher power's way of saying, you shouldn't be judging people. I judged, and I've learned so much, not only about myself, but about people in general and where they came from. Because when you're in treatment, you're going to be with people that are of all different diverse backgrounds. You could be a well-off entrepreneur to someone that's on the streets. So you really got to know a different type of people and where they came from and their story, and it really does resonate, right? So it opened my eyes big time. Even though it might have been a tough time where I hit rock bottom twice and whatnot. I did get to learn about people when I was the last time I was committed. It's so funny when I talk like this, because it's like I would never even like mention it before. Like, well, the last time I was committed to the hospital.
But it's been a while, right? So give people perspective. When was the last time?
Was January of 2019.
Right. So this is 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So for our listeners, understand that it takes time to process this, where you don't automatically go from a crisis into being able to talk easily about it.
Exactly.
So go ahead.
Exactly. And I think a lot of it has just being in situations where you're almost forced to talk about your feelings. That's it, to be in that sort of state. But what I wanted to tell you is I was in this, it was like I was in a movie or something. So I was in this committed to this place for 3 weeks, this hospital, and with the greatest patients. They're all from different backgrounds, very much eccentric. Some of them were, like one was a kid that was just going through stuff and life and whatnot, to this one woman who was, she was an artist and an incredible, did incredible paintings and whatnot. But very much so in their illness. And it doesn't only open your eyes, but it makes you, it just really, at the end of the day, you're just like everybody else, making your way through the weeds, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember we were all going out on an outing, we were actually just going on a walk, but I was thinking to myself, oh, this is just like in a movie here. You know, we're all in these different, you know, here's the police officer, here's the kid in high school, here's this artist, and we're all, you know, I don't want to use the word, I'm going to use the word, somewhat crazy, but we're enjoying life, and, you know, we're out there and getting to know each other and making our way through things together. And it was like, this could be I should make a movie, you know, because this is pretty cool stuff. And I would never see that side before, right? Never.
Right.
I always saw the other side where I was getting that person to where they needed to get help, and that was it. I didn't have that inter-reaction. Unless I was in the community, I would talk to them afterwards and that sort of thing, right? But
right.
The whole other piece, I wasn't part of it. So yeah.
I love that perspective. I grew up with a mother who is a psychiatrist. And back then, I was born in 1965, so there was no childcare. So she would either leave me with a neighbor, or she would, if she couldn't find a neighbor to watch me, she'd take me to work with her. That's what she had to do. Okay. And so I would go to the psych ward with her so she could do her rounds. And I would hang out with the patients from when I was a little baby, basically. And I think it gave me a sort of comfort around people who are really struggling with mental health issues that very few other people have. Even people who've worked in the field all their lives, there's an ease I have because I grew up on psych wards. And so what I remember most that I wanted to share with you and our listeners is that on the way out, my mom would always say, don't worry about the people in here. They know they have problems. It's the people out there that you have to watch out for.
So true.
So like, you know, you're talking about that outing and you guys just being out there and happy to be alive and outside, right? I could totally see that, right? Yeah. And how many other people who were out in the world were probably like, you know, stuck on their computers and not feeling good at all in that moment, you know, like it's just, yeah, I think being hospitalized is an opportunity. And I know there's a lot of problems in the psychiatric wards and in the psychiatric world altogether. However, if you look at it as an opportunity to kind of reset and start your recovery, then it can be a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, it's just, you know, you're safe, right? You know, you're safe from yourself because you know you're going to be looked after, whether that's a short-term or long-term thing. You know, I mean, I was definitely, there's that pushback and the fear and not wanting to deal with any of this stuff. And then coming to that realization that, you know, if you want to, you know, watch your son, you know, get married and have children and being a grandmom and all that's like, you know, there's a reason that you're here and that you haven't given up. And so I do believe, I think that way now. Maybe at the time though, you know, I think my worst experience, Sue, was when I was released after being in the hospital for like 7 weeks, which is what I really need to stabilize. And for me, medication seemed to be the route that I was going because it just literally happens. So I had these little symptoms, but all of a sudden it just, so that in order for me to just sort of mellow out a bit, I ended up getting on medication and stuff. And I think just a balancing of the medication really did help, because you know what? It takes a long time to find something that works, at least it did for me. And anyway, when I got out and I relapsed, I ended up going back to the same hospital, but I thought, oh, I'm just going to I'll just probably just go back. I'll be going up to the ward and I'll stay there for a little bit again and figure things out. That's not what happened. They actually had a, what do they call it? Sort of like a waiting area where they sort of filter the people that need the help or that are high risk. So it was kind of like a
triage center kind of thing, or
like triage, yeah. And it was probably the most horrific experience I've ever had to deal with, because what they would do is when I actually went in there, it was just me. There was nobody else that was there. And it looked just like a waiting room, literally, with a bunch of couches and stuff. And but these couches turned into beds. So they were like these little single bed type things.
Mm-hmm.
So they gave me some medication, and I talked to the psychiatrist the next day. They gave me enough so that I could sleep. I woke up the next day and there was at least 20 people that were there.
Mm-hmm.
And they ended up staying there as well. They all had their own little beds and stuff. So my hypervigilance was like overboard, because here I am thinking, okay, these are people that are coming in that are at risk, that are in their illness, that are in their addiction, and they haven't been searched. Right. This is my hypervigilance talking here, and you give them, when you come in, you just give them your purse or your knapsack or whatever it is, and that's it. They don't search you or anything like that, and they can't. They're not able to do that. But in my mind, I'm like, okay, there's somebody beside me here and somebody beside me there, and they, they're going to harm me. Like, I was a basket case, thinking that I was not doing, and it was, and the psychiatrists were, you could tell that the psychiatrists and the nurses were completely overwhelmed and exhausted. I could see that.
Right.
And they treated everybody the same, but they treated everybody awful, like really awful, like they were scolding children, school-age children, and I don't know if that was their way of, okay, well, whoever can handle this the most will get to that next stage, which is get the care to go upstairs to the ward. And that's why I left. I was there for 3 days. And I thought, you know what, this isn't helping. I'm not getting any support here at all. They're holding me here like, you're locked in with all these. Imagine somebody that's got PTSD.
Oh, right? Yeah.
And is an addict and is with all these people that you don't know from different places of life, and you're not getting any help. You go and see the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist basically says, okay, so what's the deal? You want to leave now? Have you had enough? Like, it was literally kind of like that. Would throw you some pamphlets. Here, this is what you can do once you leave here. You can contact this person. You can, it was just, triage would be a really nice way of saying it.
Yeah. So we have those kind of places here too. We call them psychiatric emergency services centers.
Oh, okay.
And they have those same like chair bed kind of things. And that's where they kind of do triage to figure out who needs to get admitted, who needs a pamphlet, who needs like some kind of outpatient treatment, all that, right? And during the pandemic, when it first started, I was self-employed, but overnight, all of my income sources dried up. And so I actually grabbed a job at a psychiatric residential treatment program near my house because I was like, I just need a job so I don't have to be stressed out about money. I didn't have any savings at the time because a couple of years ago I got really sick. So I went through all my savings. We only have private health care down here. So anyway, I was grateful for it. But downstairs from where I worked, which was a 2-week program, there was a psychiatric emergency 24-hour program that was a lot like what you were talking about. And the people who had bad PTSD, it was like torture for them. And that was only a 24-hour program. So usually they were only having to deal with it up to 24 hours. But if I ever got the word that there was somebody down there with bad PTSD, I would try to rush to admit them to the 2-week program so they could get the heck out of there because it was crazy and it was too much. It was overwhelming. Like how it felt down there. Of course, because everybody's in crisis and the staff there were a lot nicer than the people you described, but still, it's overwhelming to be surrounded by strangers when you're in crisis. And if you add on top of that having PTSD, it's really a disaster.
Yeah, literally for me to actually manage being there, I had to be highly medicated because I couldn't sleep. It was not, it really opened my eyes. I had no idea that they had anything like that,
Yeah.
No.
Now you know.
Yeah. Now I know. Yeah. And you know what? I'll tell you what. I mean, at least I was safe. It just wasn't, an environment that you want to be in for a long period of time. That's for sure.
Right.
But I was safe. So I didn't think I was safe at the time, but I was,
Right.
Yeah. And it just adds more perspective on what's available for people that are high at risk. Because I just thought, you hand them over, they'll do they might do a 72-hour hold and that's it. You don't ever know what's happening after that. Right. So I got to experience that. And that's a distant memory now.
Yeah. And that thing you were talking about where the staff were talking to you and other patients like they were bad small children, that's pretty common and really upsetting. I'm not sure why people who are in crisis often get treated like children. But I don't even think you should talk to children that way. No. I think that everyone deserves compassion, especially when they're in crisis. So it's a shame. But I think that part of the problem is there's not a lot of consciousness, like you were talking about earlier, about how people do the work when they're working in places like that, because they're just scrambling to stay on top of stuff and it's chaotic and it's hard and there's usually too much paperwork. Like every new patient I got in for my 2-week program, I had to do a 40-page assessment when they got in.
Wow.
That's crazy. That's too much paperwork for one day. Oh, and it had to be done within 24 hours, Wow. So, yeah. Wow. That's the system we have down here. I don't know about up there, but I imagine that it's busy,
I'm guessing that just based on what I saw with the nurses they were in their own little compound, it reminded me
like in a fishbowl,
yeah.
Yeah.
like it was a locked little, it was like an octagon that was sort of in the middle of the room, and it literally almost looked like it was bulletproof glass. Like you just had to knock to get, some attention.
Yeah.
They wouldn't come out unless they were giving medication. And obviously that's for their own safety, but that's pretty scary. So you're in there, locked in there, and I'm out here. What's not really
right?
Hypervigilance, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were definitely overworked. There was no doubt about it. But I feel that any kind of service work, honest to God, whatever that might be, everyone is overworked.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. And I think we really need to look at that and think about, is it smart to let people work in those kind of environments for long periods of time? Like maybe if someone in the RCMP had thought about that before you had your difficulties, you wouldn't have been allowed to work in those kind of environments for extended periods of time. Or if you did, maybe you would have had like 1 year on, 1 year off, or some kind of thing that they figured would work better for people. Because the people providing the services are also human beings. And so we have needs. And what I've seen, in my many years out there is that a lot of people who are drawn to these kinds of jobs already come with a significant amount of trauma in their past, because they're attracted to that because of their past experiences, and they actually might be more fit to survive in traumatic experiences because of their past experiences. So if you take someone who's already had a pretty large body of trauma, and then you put them in another really traumatic set of circumstances, for a while, they'll thrive. But over time, it's going to take its toll.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't realize, like, if somebody was to have asked me, before I became a police officer, well, why do you want to be a police officer? And my answer was, well, I just want to be able to help people, right?
Right.
I mean, in general, that's true, but I became a police officer because of my experience when I was a child and what I had to deal with growing up, and I wanted to be there for the kids when they didn't have that support. And that was the reason why I became a police officer. Also around domestic violence too, which is very near and dear. So anything that has to do with domestic violence, that was a big part of it, because I had to deal with that when I was a kid. So, geez, I wish I would have known that before I became a cop, But,
right.
We're just, subconscious mind is just going to put that in the shelf and I don't think it would have made a difference though. I would have still, I think the path I took was the path I needed to take.
Yeah.
And just how it is. Yes. Unfortunately, like I said, we're very much so overwhelmed, and that just really shows you how society deals with this sort of thing. And you made a comment before about that it's not something that you have to learn through experience. There's nothing that's really preventive growing up in our educational system in Canada, and some of the schools are a little bit better than others. But if you're just going to like a regular school, not a school that will offer more support to the kids, you're just basically taught to survive, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna give you some skills.
Yes.
you know,
Hope you make it.
if you make it, we're gonna teach you algebra so that you know how to do algebra when you're an adult, because that's going to be really important for you, right?
Right.
And perhaps maybe if you're going to be an engineer or a scientist or whatever the case may be, okay, I get that. But in general terms, they don't really teach you life skills other than just, you know, being a student in a social atmosphere. You sort of learn things as you go, but they don't necessarily teach you how to look at yourself, to be self-aware, to be aware of others, to they'll teach you, okay, you know, zero tolerance for bullying, which is amazing, and they have some great bullying programs, but that's about it. It's they don't really teach you how to survive in a healthy environment, and that goes with policing too. I mean, again, things are starting to get better. They're implementing things, you know, right at the police academy, but it can be so much more preventive, so that when you're in a situation where, oh, this is happening, well, I learned this, so I need to take care of myself, right?
Right.
When I went through the police academy, it was just like, yeah, so okay, so this is what can happen if you overwork and but they didn't give you the tools on how to manage any of that stuff. So
so I've been doing trainings for a long time too in nonprofits, and there's a training that I often got asked to do on burnout and secondary trauma prevention. And secondary trauma is what you'd expect. Like, you know, if you're working with people who've had a lot of trauma, it can end up impacting you, like you were talking about in your line of work. And a lot of nonprofits had enough awareness to schedule this training at least once a year, but then they didn't do the follow-up with their employees to make sure that they weren't suffering from burnout or secondary trauma. So it really didn't do very much to have this yearly training in how to recognize the signs, you know, because people in nonprofits are generally overworked. And so when things start to happen and they start experiencing these things, they just brush it off like you did, like whatever, you know, that's just how it is, too busy. And then it can be too late, you know?
Totally. And you know, I mean, the RCMP, the same thing happened. They rolled out this, you know, this program for mental health, and it was, you know, it was mandatory training that you had to take once.
What?
you there was supposed to be some sort of follow-up every year like you had, but there wasn't any. So once. So, you know, and you learned about the different colors and what they mean. Like if you're green, then you're doing great. If you're orange, you're like, if you're red, you're like, I'm done. And it was really, I hate to say this, but in my environment, it was really made out of it as a joke, really.
Yeah.
How are you feeling today? Well, I'm in the orange. I'm getting into the red. Ha ha. Ha. You know?
Yeah. It just became a joke.
Yeah, and it's
so sad.
It is, and now they actually have they have civilians that have been hired to work with the members that are having you know, issues. But in saying that, in order for any of this to transpire, all management, everybody's got to be on board with it, right? And that's not the case. Not the case, like right across the organization. And you know, it goes back to that. Yeah, you do the training once, and you know, it's not followed up on. And there needs to be a lot of changes made in society, and I don't. It takes a lot of time, and I don't know. I find that as a society, we are more reactive than preventive. And unless you're in a situation where you're advocating for it and trying the best trying your best to make a difference, that's what we're looking at. Something big has to happen. Pandemic, for example, has to happen before, you either yourself, you realize, wow, I've got something going on here. And this having this pandemic, being isolated, not being able to, spend time with my close friends and my family and whatever else has really impacted me. Now what? So I know, I say the Serenity Prayer every day, and I know,
Beautiful.
That you can only do what you can do. And, it'd be nice to be able to change the world, but let's be realistic here. That's not going to happen. My little self is not going to be able to do that. So if I can just somehow share my story and also continue learning in my journey with others, isn't only going to help me, but I hope it helps, other people that are struggling, or family or friends that have a loved one that is struggling, whether it's addiction or mental illness, that helps them to just even manage in a day. Then it makes me feel like I'm doing something.
Yeah. And maybe, I can't change the world, but maybe we can. Like, if enough of us are invested in helping, like, even just in this way, helping people with their mental health issues, that could add up to a lot of help, right?
Yeah.
It's part of why I reach out so much to other mental health channels, because I feel like if we all work together, we could really have a gigantic impact. And one fun idea I've had for a future project is to, on some holiday, do a collaboration with a bunch of mental health channels. So we have 24-hour content to get people through the holiday.
That's a cool thing, because
wouldn't that be cool? Because then if people are struggling, they could just tune in, and one of us would be going on and on about something.
Yeah.
And I can't even tell you how restorative relationships are. But in my experience, it's been the number one factor for healing. Even if you don't know the person, just having somebody there that appears to care can be huge.
Totally. And that's kind of, I listened to a podcast, and that was specifically around PTSD, first response, community, military, that sort of thing. And that was when I was really sick, and that helped. At least I knew that I wasn't alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I got some really great tips and whatnot from listening to this channel. Unfortunately, he's not doing it anymore. He's sort of moved on. Yeah, I was able to tune into that, and because for me, I was doing everything I can to reach out, to try to figure out, is anybody else out there that can help me, and how do I deal with this? Because I was I'm like the doer bee, and I would be like, hey, you've got this is what you need me to do. No problem. I'll get it done. I'm going to get it done. Like, I was like the pleaser, and I'm going to get it done, and that personality that just runs through the wall as opposed to climbing, run through the wall. I'm that kind of person. And so I'm like literally trying to figure out how to get help for myself. And it's a real struggle. It's a struggle when if you don't have a circle of support around you. And I didn't really have that. I had I had a really good friend that I worked with, but he was in Nova Scotia, which was on the side of Canada,
Yeah.
literally from where I am. And so, I mean, I would talk to him at all hours of the night too. God bless him. But I didn't have anybody like right there that I could talk to. And so this sort of platform is a great way to reach out and get something like, oh, okay, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to get through this day,
Yeah.
And it's great that YouTube exists, for example, because of that. I mean, literally anything that you need to figure out, how to change your oil on your car,
Yeah, it's all on YouTube for sure.
It's also great that they have there's that mental health aspect of things too, that, it's a very specific niche that we're in, and it's great that there's really good content out there.
Yeah. And more every day. I keep discovering new mental health content creators. It's amazing. And did you see my little ticker that's scrolling down on the bottom?
That's really cool. I was trying to read it and not look worried that I wasn't looking at you.
It's a little plug for my website, hopefultribe.com, where you can see more content. And if you like, you can schedule life coaching. And I offer life coaching 100% sliding scale. I don't actually ever turn anyone away for lack of funds. I'm really fortunate that, there's enough people who pay me that I can keep going. But I want to encourage people, if they want to schedule, to go there. And also, I want to invite you back, Chris, for part 2 of our interview, because I got a whole bunch of questions we never even got to. But I really enjoyed our time together. It was so fun. You're amazing.
Oh, thank you. I'll anytime you want me back, I'll come back and blab some more.
That's great. I bet we could talk for hours. You're great.
Oh, yeah.
You're great. And I really think this is a huge service you're doing for the community of law enforcement officers out there, because I don't think I've seen any police officers online talking about these things. I don't think I have, and I'm online a lot. Yeah. I think you might be the first, but we'll see.
Yeah,
probably the others will find you.
Yeah,
I exist.
Yeah, I don't know either, really. Yeah, and that was another reason why I wanted to do it. But it's not just for law enforcement. I actually, to be honest with you, there's been a lot of people that aren't in that kind of line of work that have reached out to me as well, because it's that's where I came from. But I think in general terms, anybody that is going through PTSD, anxiety, depression, can relate to, or complex PTSD can relate to the stuff that I'm talking about. So, yeah.
I'm so glad you're out there doing what you're doing.
Thanks.
And I have to go, but I'm gonna be after you for a part 2.
Okay, no problem. I'll be here. I'm not.
All right. Take care.
Take care.